It was a Thursday evening, and Emma was tidying up the living room when she noticed the faint buzz of her husband's phone left on the coffee table. James rarely left his phone lying around, and tonight it was different, almost careless. She didn't consider herself a snoop, but something about the notification that popped up on the screen made her pause. It was a message from someone named R. Curiosity tugged at her as she glanced around the empty room, then unlocked the screen. The message read, "Last night was amazing. I can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Red heart, *. Emma froze. A cold wave of disbelief washed over her. Her hands shook as she scrolled further, revealing an entire thread of intimate text plans and even photos exchanged over the past month. The woman, Rachel, had been meeting her husband regularly, and their messages left no room for doubt about the nature of their relationship. Emma sat down, her heart pounding in her chest. Questions stormed through her mind. How long had this been going on? How could James do this to her? She decided not to confront him immediately. Instead, she began gathering more information, trying to stay composed despite the fire burning inside her. She checked his emails, bank statements, and calendar entries, piecing together a timeline of betrayal. Every discovery felt like a dagger to her heart. The following evening, when James walked through the door, Emma was waiting. Her expression was calm, but her eyes betrayed her turmoil. "Hey," he said, smiling as he dropped his bag. "What's for dinner?" Emma didn't answer. She stood silently, her phone in hand. James's smile faltered. "I know about Rachel," she said evenly, holding up the messages she had screenshotted. His face drained of color. "Emma, Don't," she interrupted, her voice breaking. "I trusted you. I built a life with you. And this is what you've been doing behind my back." James stammered, trying to explain, but Emma had heard enough. She had already packed a bag and booked a hotel for the night. As she left the house, she realized she wasn't walking away just from him, but from the years of lies he had hidden so well. In the quiet of the hotel room, Emma allowed herself to cry. But the tears weren't just for her broken marriage. They were for the strength she knew she would need to rebuild her life. And she would, on her terms. She found out her husband was cheating on her continued. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of the hotel room, warming Emma's face. She stirred awake, her pillow damp from tears shed through the night. The ache in her chest hadn't dulled, but it was accompanied by a flicker of determination. Emma picked up her phone. Her closest friend, Claire, had texted late into the night after Emma shared the news. *, come over whenever you're ready. You don't have to face this alone. Claire had written. Emma dressed quickly, packed her things, and checked out of the hotel. By the time she arrived at Claire's cozy apartment, she felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. Claire greeted her at the door with a hug, her eyes filled with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Emma," she said softly. Emma nodded, unable to speak just yet. Claire led her to the couch, handed her a mug of coffee, and sat beside her. "I don't even know where to start," Emma finally said, staring into her cup. "I feel so stupid. I didn't see it coming." "You're not stupid," Claire said firmly. "James is the one who betrayed you, not the other way around. Don't let his actions make you doubt yourself." Over the next hour, Emma poured out everything, her pain, her anger, and her confusion. Claire listened without interruption, occasionally offering a supportive word or a tissue. "What are you going to do next?" Claire asked gently when Emma paused. Emma exhaled slowly. "I don't know. I need time to figure it out. But I know I can't stay with him. I deserve better." "That's true," Claire said. "And you don't have to figure it all out right now. One step at a time." Later that day, Emma returned to the house while James was at work. She couldn't bear to stay there long, but she needed to gather her belongings and prepare for what came next. As she packed, her mind raced. Would she file for divorce immediately? Could she afford to stay on her own? Each decision felt overwhelming, but Emma reminded herself she didn't have to solve it all at once. That evening, James called. She let it ring until his voicemail picked up. "Emma," his voice sounded desperate. "Please, just let me explain. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But I love you, and I want to fix this. Please give me a chance." Emma stared at her phone, her chest tightening. The man she thought she knew had shattered her trust. She couldn't erase his betrayal with words, no matter how sorry he claimed to be. She blocked his number. In the days that followed, Emma took small but steady steps forward. She met with a lawyer to discuss her options, leaned on Claire and a few trusted friends for support, and even started seeing a therapist to process the emotional toll of the betrayal. It wasn't easy. Nights were the hardest, when the house was quiet and memories of her life with James crept in uninvited. But with each passing day, she began to rediscover her strength. One afternoon, Emma stood in her nearly packed-up home and looked around. The pain was still there, but it was no longer all-consuming. She felt a spark of hope, an inkling that her life, though forever changed, wasn't over. As she closed the door behind her for the last time, she whispered, "This is just the beginning," and it was. In the days that followed, Emma wrestled with a whirlwind of emotions: anger, hurt, confusion. But amid the chaos, a new sense of clarity began to emerge. She realized this betrayal was not just about James's infidelity. It was about the years she had spent ignoring the small red flags, dismissing her own needs, and making excuses for his increasingly distant behavior. James, on the other hand, was relentless in his attempts to reconcile. He flooded her phone with texts, voicemails, and even handwritten notes left at her sister's house, where she had taken temporary refuge. Each message was a mix of apologies, explanations, and promises to change. One afternoon, after days of silence, Emma agreed to meet him at a cafe they used to visit early in their relationship. Sitting across from him, she studied the man she had once trusted with her whole heart. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands fidgeting nervously with his coffee cup. "I made a mistake," he began, his voice trembling. "A terrible, stupid mistake. But it didn't mean anything, Emma. You mean everything to me." She let him speak, watching the desperation in his face. Part of her wanted to believe him, to rewind time and pretend none of this had ever happened. But another part of her, stronger and more resolute, knew that forgiveness wasn't the same as forgetting. "It didn't mean anything," she echoed, her voice calm but sharp. "You built a relationship with her. You lied to me, to my face, every single day. That wasn't a mistake, James. That was a choice. Repeated choices." He looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "I want to believe you're sorry," she continued, "but what you're sorry for is getting caught. If I hadn't seen those messages, would you have stopped? Or would you still be sneaking around behind my back?" James opened his mouth to respond but hesitated, the truth too heavy to deny. His silence was answer enough. Emma felt a pang of sadness. This wasn't the man she thought she married, and the realization was both heartbreaking and liberating. "I'm not sure what happens next," she said after a long pause, "but I know I deserve better than this." For the first time, she saw James truly crumble. The weight of his actions seemed to hit him all at once, but Emma didn't feel the need to comfort him. This was his burden to carry, not hers. Over the next few weeks, Emma began taking steps to rebuild her life. She consulted a lawyer, spoke with a therapist, and leaned heavily on her sister and a few close friends who rallied around her with unwavering support. Each day felt like a small victory, whether it was reclaiming her sense of self or simply waking up and facing the world with her head held high. James, meanwhile, continued to try reaching out, though his attempts became less frequent as he realized Emma wasn't coming back. Rachel's name faded from their conversations, but Emma suspected that whatever spark they had shared had burned out quickly under the weight of guilt and reality. One evening, Emma found herself walking through the park where she and James had shared their first kiss. The memories felt distant now, like a story that belonged to someone else. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Emma smiled to herself. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in years, she felt free. Free to dream, to heal, and to discover the woman she had always been beneath the shadow of her marriage. Because in the end, Emma realized her story wasn't about James's betrayal. It was about her courage to demand more from life and from herself. And that was a story worth living. In the months that followed, Emma slowly began to rebuild her life. At first, it was difficult. Grief doesn't follow a straight line, and some days felt like she was climbing a mountain with no end in sight. But step by step, she began finding strength in herself she never knew she had. She threw herself into her work, taking on new challenges that reignited a passion she had neglected during her marriage. Her boss noticed her renewed energy and offered her a promotion, one that came with more responsibility, but also the chance to lead projects she truly cared about. Outside of work, Emma joined a yoga class her sister recommended. At first, it felt awkward and uncomfortable. She was surrounded by people who seemed far more at peace than she could imagine being. But with each class, Emma found herself relaxing a little more, her body and mind letting go of the tension she had carried for years. One Saturday morning, while attending a community event hosted by her yoga studio, Emma met someone new. His name was Daniel, a kind-eyed man with an easy smile and a quiet confidence that instantly put her at ease. They struck up a conversation about books, both realizing they shared a love for historical fiction. Over the weeks that followed, Daniel became a steady presence in Emma's life. Not someone who rushed in to fill the void left by James, but someone who encouraged her to focus on herself. He admired her independence and resilience, often reminding her that she was stronger than she gave herself credit for. As their friendship deepened, Emma began to trust again, not just in others, but in her own instincts. With Daniel, there were no red flags, no moments of doubt. He was honest, open, and attentive in a way that felt refreshing and genuine. Meanwhile, James made one final attempt to contact her. He sent a long letter, pouring out his regrets and asking for a second chance. Emma read it carefully, feeling a pang of sadness for the man she had once loved. But by the time she finished, she realized the letter wasn't about her at all. It was about James trying to absolve himself of guilt. She didn't respond. For Emma, the chapter with James was closed. One evening, as she sat on her balcony with Daniel, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, Emma realized she was happy, truly happy. It wasn't just because of Daniel or her job or the new hobbies she had embraced. It was because she had finally reclaimed her life. Looking back, Emma didn't see herself as a victim of infidelity anymore. She saw herself as a woman who had faced heartbreak, stood her ground, and come out stronger on the other side. And as she leaned into the warmth of the moment, Emma knew that her story was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Months turned into a year, and Emma found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed. The pain of James's betrayal had dulled, replaced by a quiet confidence that came from knowing she had chosen herself when it mattered most. Her relationship with Daniel had grown organically, free of the pressure and complications she once thought inevitable in love. He supported her goals, celebrated her successes, and, most importantly, encouraged her to set boundaries and prioritize her own happiness. One day, while sorting through some old boxes in her apartment, Emma came across a photo album from her marriage to James. The sight of their smiling faces didn't sting the way it once had. Instead, it felt like she was looking at a different version of herself, a younger, more naive Emma who hadn't yet learned what she truly needed in life. She decided to keep the album but placed it on a high shelf, out of sight but not forgotten. It was a part of her story after all, and she wasn't ashamed of it. As Emma grew more comfortable in her new life, she started giving back to others who were going through similar experiences. She joined an online support group for people navigating infidelity and heartbreak, sharing her story and offering advice to those struggling to find their footing. One day, she received a private message from a woman named Lily. Lily's husband had been unfaithful, and she was paralyzed by the fear of leaving him. Emma saw so much of herself in Lily's words. The self-doubt, the hesitation, the fear of the unknown. Emma replied with care, sharing how difficult it had been to take that first step, but how empowering it had been to reclaim her life. Over time, the two women became friends, exchanging messages that often felt like lifelines during their toughest days. Meanwhile, Emma's career continued to thrive. The promotion she had received turned into an opportunity to lead a major project, one that brought her into the public eye. She gave a presentation at a conference, her voice steady and confident as she spoke to a room full of professionals. As she stepped off the stage to applause, she caught sight of Daniel in the audience, beaming with pride. He didn't try to overshadow her accomplishments or take credit for her growth. He simply stood by her side, cheering her on. That night, as they walked hand in hand along the waterfront, Daniel stopped suddenly. "You know," he said, turning to face her, "I've watched you grow so much over the past year. It's been the most incredible thing to see." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "And I want to keep watching," he added, pulling a small box from his pocket. Emma's breath caught as he knelt down. "I know you've been through so much, and I don't ever want to rush you into anything you're not ready for," he said. "But I love you, Emma, and I'd be honored to build a future with you. One built on trust, respect, and everything you've taught me about what love should really be." Tears filled Emma's eyes as she looked down at him. For a moment, she thought about all the pain and heartache that had brought her to this point. She thought about the choices she had made and the woman she had become. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and sure. "Yes, Daniel." As they embraced under the stars, Emma realized that she hadn't just found love again. She had found herself. And this time, she knew it was a love she could trust. The engagement brought Emma a sense of joy she hadn't thought possible just a few years ago. But as the days turned into weeks and wedding planning began, she couldn't ignore the lingering traces of her past. Every decision, big or small, seemed to pull her back into memories of her first marriage. The color schemes, venue choices, even the guest list sparked a quiet unease she couldn't fully explain. Daniel noticed her hesitation, and one evening, gently broached the subject. "Emma," he said as they sat together on the couch, her notebook of wedding ideas untouched on the coffee table, "is something bothering you? You've seemed a little distant." Emma sighed, running her fingers through her hair. "It's not you, Daniel. It's me. I'm excited about marrying you. I really am. But planning a wedding brings back memories of my first one. I thought I'd moved on completely, but I guess there are still pieces of it I need to work through." Daniel nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That makes sense. What if we did things differently? Made it about us, not about tradition or what's expected?" Emma considered this. She realized that much of her anxiety stemmed from the fear of repeating old mistakes, of trying to create a perfect image rather than focusing on what truly mattered. The next day, she and Daniel decided to scrap the elaborate plans and instead plan an intimate ceremony with only their closest family and friends. They chose a scenic outdoor spot by a lake where they had shared many peaceful moments together. There would be no grand ballroom, no towering cake, no pressure to impress anyone. Just them, their love, and the people who had supported them along the way. As the weeks passed, Emma felt the weight on her chest begin to lift. The simplicity of their plans felt authentic, a true reflection of the partnership they had built. On the morning of her wedding day, Emma stood by the lake, the soft breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers. Her sister helped her with the final touches of her dress, a simple, elegant gown that felt more like her than anything she'd worn before. "You're glowing," her sister said, squeezing her hand. "I feel different this time," Emma admitted, her voice steady. "I'm not walking into this with blind hope. I know who I am now. I know what I deserve." When Daniel saw her walking toward him, his smile lit up the entire lakeside. They exchanged vows that they had written themselves, words that spoke not of perfection but of commitment, growth, and the promise to always communicate and respect one another. As they exchanged rings, Emma glanced at the faces of her friends and family. Among them, she noticed Lily, the woman she had met through the support group. Lily gave her a knowing smile, her own transformation evident in the confident way she carried herself. When the ceremony ended, Emma and Daniel joined their guests for a small, laughter-filled reception by the water. There was no drama, no tension, just an overwhelming sense of love and contentment. That evening, as Emma and Daniel danced under the stars, she realized how far she had come. Her past had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. "You're quiet," Daniel said, pulling her closer. "What's on your mind?" Emma smiled up at him. "I was just thinking about how I used to wonder if I'd ever feel whole again. And now, standing here with you, I know I am." Daniel kissed her forehead. "You've always been whole, Emma. You just needed to see it for yourself." As they swayed to the music, surrounded by the warmth of their loved ones, Emma allowed herself to fully embrace the moment. Her story wasn't one of heartbreak anymore. It was a story of resilience, self-discovery, and the power of choosing love, both for herself and for the life she had built. This was her happy ending, but more importantly, it was her new beginning.